Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. In these weekly videos, I bring you my top 5 transfer targets. So, without further ado, let's look at my targets ahead of game week 9. We're going to start with one of my favourite players to own in the game, and that is Callum Wilson. I started the season with Callum Wilson in game week 1. Not that many people owned him. For me, I was deciding between Harvey Barnes and Callum Wilson. I ended up going with Callum Wilson, and he returned very steadily. I think it was something like 16 points in the first 3 game weeks, and then I decided to move him on after that because I think he might have picked up an injury or the fixture started to turn. But I really enjoyed owning Callum Wilson, and he's now back from injury, and in the second minute against Spurs, he showed exactly what he can do, and he's actually on my shortlist before he scored that goal, but that just confirmed that when he plays, his underlying statistics are absolutely fantastic. He passes the eye test. He's on penalties. He's talismanic. He's relatively fixture-proof in that if Newcastle are going to score, you would expect Callum Wilson to be involved in some way or another. And even when the fixtures do toughen up, you still expect teams to score sporadically. And I just love him. I think he's the sort of player that will nicely tick along, but also in those easier fixtures, as you can see in game week 9 and game week 14 against Palace and Norwich. These are the sort of fixtures you could see him hauling in as well. He's definitely not like Jimenez. I think Jimenez is the sort of player that you're going to be very lucky to get more than 9 points from him. He usually only gets the 1 attacking return. Wilson is very steady and he does tick along, but he also has that explosive ability as well. So I really like Wilson. I'm a massive fan of him inside FPL and outside of FPL as well, just regular football too. But I enjoyed owning him at the start of the season and he's definitely on my shortlist. If we take a look at the underlying statistics first, you can see he's projected to get 21 points over the next 6 game weeks. I think that's probably slightly lower because the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm is probably catching up with the fact that he is now fully fit. I think if he was fully fit, that would probably be closer to sort of 25, 26, but it might also represent the slightly tricky fixtures they've got coming up. Expected FPL points per 90 over the first 8 games. Obviously, doesn't play all 8 of those games, but he's 6.73 expected FPL points per 90, which, can I just say, is incredibly high for a striker. Because they don't get the extra point for goals and they don't get the extra point for clean sheets, strikers often have a much lower expected FPL points per 90, normally around 3.5 or 4. So 6.73 for Callum Wilson is unbelievably good. Touches in the box, 6.17. We know he's a bit of a fox in the box. He's your classic number 9. He will get goals from inside the box quite regularly. And that's what we can see here as well with his shot map, which we'll get onto in a second. Expected assists, pretty abysmal. As with a lot of brilliant strikers, people like Calvert-Lewin is another good option. They don't tend to have very high expected assists. Jamie Vardy is another one that often doesn't as well. And that's absolutely fine. We're not expecting our elite strikers to be getting great assist opportunities. Cristiano Ronaldo is another option as well that doesn't tend to have very high creativity threats. So that doesn't bother me too much because if you go one down after that, his non-penalty expected goals is 0.55 and his penalty expected goals or his normal expected goals incorporating penalties is around 0.75. So his underlying stats from a goal threat perspective are elite. They're very good. That's sort of a premium level, maybe just below a premium level, but that's definitely some fantastic underlying statistics. And his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists combined is 0.57, therefore. As I said, if you take a look at his touch maps, his shot map, sorry, that's not a touch map, that's a shot map. They're all very central and they're all inside the box pretty much, apart from a few outside the box. That's absolutely ideal for a striker. All of these opportunities are going to, or most of these opportunities will tend to be quite high XG opportunities. They're more big chances than you would find from your average striker. And that's one of the reasons that I'm drawn to Callum Wilson. The reason I'm suggesting him this week, because I know they've got relatively tricky fixtures coming up in game week 10 to 13 against Chelsea, Brighton, Brentford and Arsenal, is I just love the fixture against Crystal Palace in game week 9. I love the fixture against Norwich in game week 14. And as I said, yes, the fixtures are slightly tricky for Newcastle in game week 10, 11, 12 and 13. But Newcastle's attacking data has actually been really excellent. And I still fancy Newcastle to score maybe 3, 4, 5 goals over that 4-game week period. And as I said, Callum Wilson is so talismanic that he's normally involved in at least 30, 40% of Newcastle's goals. So I could see him getting a goal against Palace, a couple against Norwich, and then a few in that middle period. And the other reason I like him is that he is cheaper than the likes of Jimenez, Calvert-Lewin, Bamford, Antonio. You can get him for a cutthroat price. He is slightly more than those budget forwards, but he is slightly lower than those mid-price. So he's in a really nice price point where if you can't quite get up to those mid-price forwards, then I do really, really like Callum Wilson. It is, I suppose, a bit of a punt, hoping that it will stay fit once again, and it is knowing the fact that you either have to be able to rotate him in game week, sort of maybe game week 10 would be the main one you'd want to rotate him, potentially 11, 12 and 13, or be willing to hold him through the slightly trickier fixtures. I just really fancy Newcastle going forward at the moment. I really don't fancy them from a defensive point of view. They've been absolutely terrible, but from an attacking perspective, I quite fancy them. Callum Wilson, when he plays, has unbelievable underlying statistics, takes lots of shots, gets lots of shots and touches in the box. For me, a talismanic figure at 7.3 with pretty good fixtures coming up. I really like the look of Callum Wilson. So we're sticking with strikers today. The main theme is going to be strikers. And the first one I'm recommending is someone that I actually recommended back in Game Week 5 in this very series. So if you've been watching every episode of this series, firstly, thank you very much. Secondly, make sure you do it if you haven't watched all of the episodes. I did recommend him back in Game Week 5, which I'm really proud of because I was going to say not many content creators were recommending him, but I don't think I saw a single content creator recommending him back in Game Week 5. I saw the potential that he had with the fixtures coming up. I saw the underlying statistics were relatively good. We know how good he can be, and I just fancied him over the upcoming game weeks, and he did demonstrate that was indeed a good call, and I actually continue to fancy him over the coming game weeks. And I know a lot of people say this about their wildcard drafts, but I was very, very close to picking him on my wildcard draft. And the fixtures coming up are quite difficult, but what Jamie Vardy's pretty much proven is that he is fixture-proof. And I don't like to say that about a lot of players. I say that about people like Salah, Trent Alexander-Arnold, etc. There are certain players that you would pretty much play in any fixture and be pretty confident that they could return in that fixture. And Jamie Vardy over the years, and particularly this season as well, has pretty much shown that, yes, he performs very, very well. He is sort of a flat track bully. He performs very well against the easier teams, but he also ticks along and can return against the more difficult teams. I think it was last season, did he get 2 goals against Manchester City? He has that ability to do so. And so the upcoming fixtures, Brentford, Arsenal, Leeds and Chelsea, I would say Brentford, Arsenal and Chelsea are actually pretty tricky fixtures from an attacking perspective. Leeds, I don't think is a particularly difficult fixture, no matter what the colour scheme says there. Brentford have defended very, very well so far this season. They've been one of the best defences. Arsenal over the last 4 or 5 game weeks have also been one of the best defences. And Chelsea, whilst their underlying data hasn't been that amazing from a defensive point of view, they are obviously a brilliant defence. They defend very well. And therefore, I think game week 9, 10 and 12 aren't great fixtures for Vardy. But 11, 13 and 14 are fantastic fixtures. And like I said, even in those more difficult fixtures, I still fancy him to score. So I wouldn't necessarily let the fixtures put me off from bringing him in. And I do quite easily see him scoring against all of these teams on this list right here. Probably Chelsea being the most difficult fixture of the bunch. If we take a look at the underlying statistics, projected points-wise, the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm massively fancies Jamie Vardy. 33.4 points over the upcoming game weeks, over the next 6 game weeks, which is absolutely fantastic. 5.67 expected FPL points per 90. As you can see, that isn't quite as good as we've just discussed with Callum Wilson. So obviously Callum Wilson's is a much smaller sample size, so do take that with a pinch of salt. But as you can see, it shows how good Callum Wilson's underlying statistics are. Touches in the box, again, not quite as good as Callum Wilson's, but still very, very good at 5.82. Expected assist, similarly to Callum Wilson, quite low, but he is an out-and-out goal scorer. He has shown in the past he has a creative streak, especially when Iheanacho plays up top with him, but you're not picking Jamie Vardy for those expected assists. Non-penalty expected goals of 0.47, which is about an expected goal every 2 games, which is pretty good. And we do know he is on penalties as well, similarly to Wilson once again, which puts his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists at 0.55 per 90. So they're not overwhelming, but what we know with Jamie Vardy is that he will consistently maintain those stats. He doesn't tend to fluctuate too much. And he often outperforms his expected goals because he's such an elite, fantastic finisher, and he's on penalties as well. So whilst I do like looking at the statistics, he's just a fantastic player. You can see from the shot map, once again, we're looking at shot maps today because we're looking at strikers. He's had 23 shots, and I think 20 of those, or 19 of those shots, have been inside the box. He's a fox in the box, playing for the Foxes. It's exactly what you want from your striker in Jamie Vardy. I absolutely love him. I absolutely applaud anyone that is choosing someone like Vardy over Ronaldo and Lukaku. To have the ability to choose Vardy despite the fact that Lukaku's fixture's coming up, I really like it. For me personally, I'm not going to take out Lukaku with Norwich, Burnley and Newcastle coming up. I'm just not going to do it. However, if you want to do that, I think it's a great option. And personally, I think that Vardy alongside Lukaku, if the budget allows it, might be a fantastic, fantastic option if you can get 3 premiums in your team. So I really like Jamie Vardy coming up. I think he's a great option. I don't think the fixtures are as bad as they necessarily look. Great underlying statistics. If you're going to take a punt on Vardy, I really, really like it. So for the game week 8 transfer targets. I like to be honest when I got something wrong, and I'll be honest, I didn't get it wrong just recommending it for you guys. I put him on my wildcard too, and that's actually Adam Armstrong. I recommended him for game week 8. I genuinely thought he was a fantastic option, so much so that I put him in my wildcard, and it just so happens that he suddenly lost his place. I spoke to so many different Saints fans. I looked through so many forums. He looked like the most nailed player in their team pretty much, alongside the likes of JWP, etc. But it didn't look like it had any ability to ever be dropped, like even rotated for a few minutes, let alone dropped completely. He didn't feature at all, which was nice because it meant at least some points off the bench. But I was very shocked. And having a look at the highlights with Redmond and Broja, which I'm going to call him, I've spoken to a few people. Apparently it's Broja. It could be Broja, but I'll call him Broja. So I've spoken to, after seeing the highlights and speaking to a few Saints fans after the game, they seem to think that Armstrong might continue to sit on the bench at least for the next few, just because the front two worked so fantastically. Now, the reason I like Broja is because he's £5 million. He's basically the cheapest option we've got at the moment. We had the likes of Dennis earlier in the year. We also have Hwang at 5.6 million. So there are some cheap options. We can go up to Pookie or potentially someone like Tony, who's a little bit more expensive. But at 5 million, he's pretty much the only option. And I do really like that if you're trying to squeeze in a Jamie Vardy, if you're trying to squeeze in a Heung-min Son as well into your team, if you're trying to get 3 premiums, or perhaps you're trying to get some money into your defense and you want to downgrade someone like Jimenez or Antonio, etc. I do quite like the option of putting him in. What I would say from the start is this is a massive punt because we don't know that he's going to continue to start. This is obviously his first start. I'm not sure that he'll continue to do so. But having spoke to, again, some Saints fans, they seem to think it's his place to lose at the moment due to how well he's shown signs earlier on in the season and how well he played in game week 8. So take it with a pinch of salt. What I would say is if I was making this move, I would be doing it to use him as maybe a rotation option, a first sub, a second sub. I'm not sure that I would want to rely on him to start in my starting 11. People did that earlier on in the season with Dennis, and you can see already that now people are looking to move Dennis on. So for me, it would be to get to upgrade and put funds elsewhere and to have him as a nice bench option. But as a bench option, I don't think you can really go wrong, which we're going to discuss now for so many different reasons. The first is, which we discussed in last week's video, Southampton's fixtures are unbelievable coming up. Game week 9, Burnley. Game week 10, Watford. Game week 11, Villa. Game week 12, Norwich. Liverpool in 13 is not great, but again, you're probably not starting Broja in most of these games. You'll have him like first or second sub, so you could just put him third sub for game week 13. And then with game week 14, Leicester at home, who have been pretty leaky at the back. So the fixtures are, I wouldn't say as good as you can get, but Burnley, Watford, Villa, Norwich, the next 4. Maybe if you replaced Villa with, I don't know, someone like Newcastle or Southampton. We can't be Southampton. Someone like Newcastle, then that would be the perfect 4 fixtures. But I think Burnley, Watford and Norwich would be in my top 5 fixtures I'd want to target. So absolutely brilliant fixtures coming up. The second reason, as well as the fixtures, underlying statistics for Broja are amazing. And again, very small sample size. But ignore the projected points because the Fantasy Football Fix algorithm hasn't caught up with the fact that he could potentially start. But 7.32 expected FPL points per 90, which is the highest we've seen today. 7.13 touches in the box. Absolutely brilliant. Elite levels for a striker. Absolutely involved in everything that's going on up top. 0.04 expected assists, which is following on the trend of Wilson and Vardy. We're looking at strikers here who just are a goal threat. They're your classic number 9 sort of strikers. Non-penalty expected goals. Again, a small sample size, but it's 0.7. Very impressive, which puts his non-penalty expected goals and expected assists at 0.74, which is the best of the 3 strikers we've discussed today. You can see his shot map on screen. It sort of follows a similar trend once again to Wilson and Vardy. Lots of shots in the box, most of the shots very central as well. So what I would say, in these 3 options, what I've hopefully done for you guys is I've presented you with 3, hopefully, very good options at 3 different price points. If you're looking for a cheap striker to bring in, I'd bring in Broja. Apologies if it is Broja. I'd bring in Broja. If you're looking for a mid-price or slightly cheaper than mid-priced option, I like the look of Callum Wilson. And if you're looking for a premium or, again, slightly cheaper than premium option, I really like Jamie Vardy. So if you're looking to bring in a striker this week, I really like those 3 options. There are, of course, other options as well. I like the look of Ivan Toney. I think Toney's a fantastic transfer this week, but I'm saving Toney for next week. A little bit of a spoiler there, because obviously the fixture against Burnley is that much better than the fixture against Leicester this week. So there are lots of options, but for me, Broja, Wilson and Vardy are 3 fantastic options. If you're looking for a very cheap striker to rotate with some other players in your team, it might be worth taking the punt on him. The final 2 players we're going to discuss today, we're going to do in the classic battle format that you've seen in past episodes as well. And those are 2 players which I believe will be in high demand in the coming week, Ben Chilwell and Reece James. But if you take a look straight away at their transfer statistics at the top, you might not be able to see it if you're on a phone. Ben Chilwell, at the time of recording on Monday evening, has been transferred in by 129,000 managers in this game week alone. Reece James has been transferred in by 7,000 managers this game week alone. Now, that does make sense. Ben Chilwell has started 2 games in a row, played 90 minutes 2 games in a row, and scored 2 games in a row, and he's just scored 15 points in this game week. Whereas Reece James has just come back from injury, didn't feature in game week 8 until the 89th minute, and came on as a cameo for 1 point. So I do understand why people are definitely favouring Ben Chilwell. But there's definitely a conversation to be had as to who is the better option out of the two. They both have their pros, they both have their cons. If we just take a quick glance at the fixtures, which we've already started to discuss previously in the episode today, we've got Norwich, Newcastle and Burnley in the next 3 for Chelsea. The fixtures are just so good. That Norwich at home fixture is the fixture at the moment to target from an attacking point of view and a defensive point of view. So I really, really like the idea of bringing in a Chelsea fullback this week if you don't have one. I currently own Reece James from my wildcard, but I might be looking to be bringing in Ben Chilwell either this week or in the coming weeks, because I think having both of them, most weeks I reckon you'll get probably one of the defenders, and in the weeks where you don't get one, you'll probably get the other, and in some weeks you'll get both. And then if you have someone like Livramento on your bench as well, it could work out really, really well for you. Fixtures are great. The first thing that I want to note, which we're not going to discuss here in the statistics, but is very, very important to note, is that Ben Chilwell is much, much less likely than Reece James to cameo off the bench. So last season, across the entirety of the season, Ben Chilwell only made 1 appearance off the bench in the Premier League, and that was under Frank Lampard, not Thomas Tuchel. So Thomas Tuchel doesn't bring Ben Chilwell off the bench. The main reason for that is that Alonso has the ability to run up and down the pitch. Alonso has the ability to play 90 minutes in a game. If Chelsea are absolutely cruising, there's no need to bring Ben Chilwell on. And if Chelsea is struggling for a goal, it sometimes doesn't make sense to bring on Chilwell because Alonso is arguably the more attacking fullback. So I don't think there's any real requirement there to ever bring Chilwell off the bench unless Alonso's really puffing or he's played a lot of minutes recently. So therefore, there's not really many times that Chilwell will make an appearance off the bench. Reece James, because when Reece James doesn't play, it's either Hudson-Odoi out of position or Azpilicueta playing right wing back. There's much more of a reason to bring on Reece James. Firstly, Azpilicueta is a slightly older player. He's probably got the legs to run up and down for 90 minutes, but I don't think Thomas Tuchel, considering how important Azpilicueta is, will want to risk Azpilicueta too often. And also, if they are struggling for a goal, taking off Azpilicueta and bringing on Reece James is an attacking move. So there are 2 reasons every single game that Reece James doesn't start to bring him off the bench. And I believe he made 8 cameo appearances last season. So 8 appearances off the bench last season. So that alone is quite a big reason to pick Ben Chilwell, because you don't really want your defender coming off the bench for 1 point, especially if you've got someone like Duffy or Livramento first sub. You'd much rather have the ability of having one of those cheaper players with a nice fixture, especially Livramento, playing the full amount of minutes. So this week in particular, if Reece James didn't come on, I would have got Livramento's full 6 points. Unfortunately, he came on for a few minutes and therefore I got 1 point off Reece James. So that's the first thing to note, is that you're more likely to get cameo appearances off James, so that favours Ben Chilwell. Obviously, Ben Chilwell is £0.2 million more expensive now, so it is worth taking into account that you will save a bit of money going for Reece James. If we take a look at the underlying statistics, they've both played a similar amount of minutes, roughly 2 games worth. Projected points-wise, Reece James does come out slightly on top just because he has better underlying statistics. Expected FPL points per 90, Reece James is on 8.59. In comparison to Ben Chilwell's 6.19. So Reece James does come out on top there. And non-penalty expected goals and expected assists, Reece James absolutely batters Ben Chilwell, in all honesty. 0.75 for Reece James. Expected non-penalty expected goals and expected assists per 90. That is better than Callum Wilson, Jamie Vardy, Jimenez. Not quite as good as Antonio, but better than the likes of Bruno Fernandes. He is performing from an attacking perspective like a premium striker, which is absolutely amazing. And again, it is over a very, very short period. And a lot of that is skewed by that 18-pointer that he got against Arsenal. But he does put up consistently very, very good underlying statistics, James. Ben Chilwell's at 0.34. Looks pretty poor in comparison to James, but that is still highly impressive from Ben Chilwell. And he does keep up very, very consistent numbers. What I would say is that Ben Chilwell's expected goals is higher than Reece James's expected goals. So from a goal threat perspective, Ben Chilwell does come out slightly on top in comparison to Reece James, who's slightly lower. The reason that Reece James is therefore expected goal involvement in entirety is so much higher is his expected assist is significantly higher than than Ben Chilwell. So not only is Reece James a relatively good goal threat, his assist potential blows Ben Chilwell out of the water. So I would say that Reece James is definitely the more creative asset in comparison to Ben Chilwell, where I would say Ben Chilwell is the slightly more goal threat out of the two options. So do take that into account. Big chances wise, very, very similar. Both roughly a big chance every 2 games. And touches in the box, very, very similar again, all around, both around 4.5. In this case, Reece James just coming out on top. What you can see by the touch maps, the final thing I want to discuss, and this sort of explains why for some, for Reece James, the creativity threat is higher, and why for Ben Chilwell, the goal threat is higher. Ben Chilwell is what I would say makes some inverted runs. So yes, he plays as a wide left winger back, but when he makes some runs, it's not always overlapping the wide forward or overlapping Lukaku and Chilwell. He often cuts inside. We see the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Cancelo do this a little bit. Yes, he attacks on the outside, but he cuts in a little bit. And he makes those inverted runs. And that's why he finds himself, at points, as we saw with the goal in game week 8, he finds himself in those central areas quite a lot. If you take a look at Reece James's touch map, it's very, very wide. He makes those overlapping runs more so than he does those inverted runs. And that's why his creativity is so good, because he makes those beautiful early crosses and those great crosses from those wide crossing positions. He doesn't get central as much as Ben Chilwell. Yes, he's still getting touches in the box, but as you can see from the touch map, a lot of them are sort of wide right or wide left. They're not as many central, whereas Ben Chilwell has had a few more central touches. I think they're both fantastic options. I do still maintain the fact that when they're both playing, I think Reece James has the slight more attacking potential because of how many routes to points he has. And I still maintain the fact that Reece James has less competition at right back. I think Hudson-Odoi isn't a right back. Azpilicueta is a right back, but he's not a right wing back. Therefore, I think he's favoured at right centre back. And I think Reece James has brilliant competition. Ben Chilwell has brilliant competition in Marcus Alonso. So I think Reece James is the slightly better attacking threat. I think he has slightly less competition, but the cameos is the big thing. Ben Chilwell is much less likely to come off the bench. Therefore, Reece James is much more likely to frustrate you with 1-pointers when he doesn't play. You need to weigh all that up. Either way, I think it is definitely worth bringing in a Chelsea defender this week. And in my opinion, I would be going for one of the 2 fullbacks in Ben Chilwell or Reece James. So guys, there you have it. Those are my 5 suggestions for players to bring in ahead of Game Week 9. I really hope you are enjoying this weekly series on top transfer targets. If you are, please let me know below. Also, if you have any feedback on ways you think I can improve, by all means, let me know below. I'll read the comments and I'll try to improve as much as possible. If you are indeed enjoying the content though, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. It helps support the channel to grow so very much, and we appreciate your support so much too. Until next time guys, which will of course be next week, next Tuesday. Thank you very much. Catch you soon. Bye-bye.